Well, we've gone all a bit of a funny kind of shape now because I've gone the wrong way with my phone, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter, does it? I think we should be able to do this. Let me just see if I can get us into widescreen as planned. Orientation locked. Rotate back. No, we're just going to keep going. So I hope you're all right. I do want to just point out to you that I was, in fact, sucking on this type of fisherman's friend. So, you know, can you all see me okay? And can you hear me? That's the main thing that's really important. I just want to be able to see that you are able to hear me and that I'm able to hear you. So I'm still sideways apparently. So let's see if we can tweak this round. Give me one sec. I'm not sure I can. That's all right though, isn't it? Well, that's the wrong way around. That's even the wrong. That's the window you saw there. So I think what we'll do now is we'll just go back to where I was before. I don't want to be sideways for you. So we've got quite a lot to get through. So now that you're all here and now that I've verified for you that I am actually going with the fisherman's friend that's a sweet and not anything else. I also have my tissues in case I start sneezing. I have got a bit of a cold. I've also got my delicious nettle infusion. So cheers to you all. I hope you're all well. Now, a big thank you to Becca. I laughed so much during that I had such a good time. It was brilliant. I'm not quite sure how Becca managed to incorporate so many disparate things into that chat, but she did. So thank you very much, Becca, for that. And thanks to everyone who has been joining us so far on Tarothon. It's been absolutely brilliant. And thank you to Simon, a big thank you to Simon, who has done such a good job of pulling all this together and coordinating us all. It's absolutely been brilliant so far. I've watched everyone so far. I'm going to hang on and see if I can watch as many others as possible. Now, a bit of housekeeping for you. Next up is Kelly, who is Truth in Story. The link to her channel is in the description. So if you pop down there, you'll be able to catch up with her when we end the hour. And there's also a link down there to my blog post, which has got a link to all of the different channels on it. So what I want to do is make sure that you are able to catch up with those. So please check that out. And hello to everyone in chat. Now, I'm not going to be able to catch up, I think, with absolutely everybody in chat as we go forward. But what I'll do is I'll try and catch up with the chat a bit later on. What I'll also do is at the end of this video, I'll go back through the chat and I will pick up any of the questions that I missed during the chat, and I'll do a follow-on video. So if you have any questions, then we'll be able to pick them up there. So thank you all for being here, and thank you to my lovely moderators who are there and who will keep you all safe and comfortable while we're moving forward. Now, what I've done is I've got some notes here. I've got so much to get through that I want to just make sure that I'm staying on track, and I've got some timings here as well. So what I would like to do is just give you an outline, give you an idea of what I'm going to be covering in this chat. So my topic is tarot, non-duality and enlightenment. Now, I don't think we can make any more of a switch from Becca's humorous event to this, because this sounds terribly serious, doesn't it? Well, it is kind of serious. It's kind of big picture stuff, but it's also not that serious. It's also about us getting in touch with who and what we really are, and that's really what this is all about. So what I want to do is cover, first of all, what non-duality is. I want to talk to you about what that is. We'll chew the fat on what some really wise people have said about tarot and non-duality in particular. And then I want us to have our own experience of it. So I've got some exercises for you to do to tap into the idea of tarot and enlightenment and non-duality. And my premise in this video is that you are already enlightened. You are already there. You don't need to do anything different in order to become enlightened. Let me just move you over so that we're absolutely okay. So then what we'll do is we'll talk about tarot. We'll talk about tarot and what it means in terms of non-duality. What does it tell us? How can we use it? And I'll also share for you a couple of tarot and non-tarot resources for those who want to explore the subject a bit more. And I've actually got 3 decks that I want to share with you. 2 that you're possibly familiar with, and 1 that I think you possibly haven't seen before. And then at the end, I want to cover some practices, including a new non-dual tarot spread, which I've invented, and which, if we've got time, I'll try and do a reading using that non-dual tarot spread. So that is my schedule. So I hope that that works for you. So let's begin with what is non-duality? Because we often hear this word bandied around. It's often used in metaphysical and spiritual circles. But what does it mean? Well, literally, what it means is not two. And it comes from the Sanskrit word Advaita, which means literally not two, and it gives its name to that Hindu tradition that many of you will have heard of called Advaita Vedanta. Now, Advaita Vedanta is as old as the Upanishads, which date back to the first millennium, so way back when, but it was popularized and made a bit more accessible by an 8th century scholar called Adi Shankara, who wrote a lot about Advaita, and a number of mystical traditions tap into the idea of Advaita and non-duality. So traditions like Taoism, Buddhism, and even some elements of mystical Christianity emphasize the idea that whilst we might perceive a world of separation in which we're all separate, we actually exist in reality in a world of unity. And Simon has said that two but not two in Nichiren Buddhism is another way of saying it. Yes, absolutely. If you go into almost any spiritual tradition, you will find something that relates to the concept of non-duality. And the thing about non-duality, even in what I've just said there, in terms of we think that we exist in a world of separation, when in actual fact we exist in a world of unity. What's interesting there is that the moment we say that, you see how language breaks things down for us and instantly makes things not quite work. Because the moment I talk about we, or me, or I'm implying also not we. So there's that duality, there's that two that instantly comes into being the moment you start thinking about one. So sometimes non-duality is interpreted as meaning one thing, but the moment you think of one thing, you then imply in your own mind that there are other things, and non-duality is beyond even that. So it's impossible to understand with the intellect. We can't do it. We can't apprehend it totally with the intellect. So what I invite you to do in this video is, if there are moments where you're thinking, this doesn't make sense, good. It's not meant to make sense to your intellect, it's experiential. And there are certain things that lend themselves really well to the non-dual experience. And there are things that help us to transcend our separate perceptions, like art, music, poetry, the beauty of nature or the beauty of anything, orgasm, ooh, you know, getting a bit kind of flirty there. Back to the Becca Tarot Night Owl school of Tarothon videos. And also things like meditative states where we transcend our sense of our separate existence, and metaphysical tools like the tarot. You see, I've brought it all back to the tarot. That's what this video is about. How does tarot relate to the concept of non-duality? My goodness, we've got 195 people in the room. Thank you all for being here. Marvellous to see you. So there are some really wise people who've spoken about tarot, and we're going to have a look at what some of them have said, sorry, about non-duality, and we're going to have a look at what some of them have said in a moment. But first I want to go to the wisest person of them all, and that is your good self. So what we're going to do is we're going to consider our own experience in relation to non-duality and tarot. And what I want to do is invite you to consider, are you a separate thing rattling around in this vast universe, or are you something else? And there are 3 exercises that I'm going to share with you. Now, normally I would do this very quickly. By the way, before we go on, can I just say that Maya is here in spirit on my t-shirt. She's not actually physically here. She might pop in, who knows, but she is here in spirit to say hello to you all. Wow! Yes, right, back to our 3 exercises. Now, normally I would do this in a very meditative state, and I would be saying to you, relax, breathe, get into a lovely kind of relaxed state. We haven't got time to do that in a great deal of time, so what I'm going to ask you to do is just take a deep breath with me. Take a deep breath, and we'll go into 3 exercises. So if you want to join me, then just 1 deep breath, and we'll go into 3 exercises on non-duality. So the first one, I want to invite you to find, if you can, separation. So consider your awareness in this moment and everything that you are aware of. Think about what you hear, what you feel, what you see, what you think, what you remember about things that have happened to you, what you believe, the expectations that you might have of the future, and notice that all of those things, all of those apparently separate things, arise mutually in your awareness, as your awareness. So consider your experience right now, right here. Are any of those things that you're thinking of, that you're perceiving, whether it's what you hear, what you remember, what you believe, are any of those things existing for you anywhere other than in your awareness, as your awareness right now? The second thing I want to ask you to do, the second exercise, is splitting time. So I want you to consider the concept of time. We often think about time as being a line along which exists the past, the present, and the future. And I want you to think about now. Consider now. Do you experience now as moving along that line from past to future? In that the now is sometimes back then, and sometimes in the future, and sometimes now? How fast does it move? And can you switch yourself in the timeline from now to then, past or future, in anything other than in your awareness now? So consider, where do the past and the future live? Do they ever live in your experience anywhere other than in this moment? Because when you were in the past, isn't it the case that you were in this moment? And when you're in the future, isn't it going to be the case that you are in, or will be in, this moment? So ask yourself, in your experience, is it ever not this moment now? I'm saying, somebody, where was it, Heather said, you had a bit of a Spaceballs moment there. I have Spaceballs moments all the time. My life is one big Spaceballs moment. So my third exercise, now this is one that was developed by a chap called Douglas Harding, who wrote the book on having no head. We're going to come back to this book shortly in my list of resources that I hope will be of use to you. But he is an English mystic, and he developed this exercise where you're going to discover that you have no head. Yes, indeed. So here's what you do. Now, some of you might be in a room with other people, and if you are, you can do that with them being there. And some of you will have to imagine that you're in a room with other people. But either way, I want you to imagine that you're in a room and there are other people there with you. So what you would do is you start off by looking at those people and pointing at them one by one, and you start by pointing at their feet, and you notice as you point at them, you are seeing other separate people. And you start moving your finger up. You move your finger up past their shins and their kneecaps and their thighs, and up to their belly and their chest, and then up to their head. And you're pointing at their head, at their faces. And what you're seeing in their faces is, of course, the thing that you identify as them. Often when we think about people, if you think about anyone in your life, you probably see their face. That's probably what you see, what you think of. So when you're pointing at other people, that's what you point at. Now, do it for yourself. So do it right now with me. Point at your feet and slowly move that finger up to your shins. Now it's pointing at your shins, at your knees. You can't see it from me. I have not got a chamber pot under this table, just in case anyone is wondering what I'm doing here. I'm doing this very important non-dual exercise. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, you need to look at Becca's chat from half an hour ago. So now you're moving your finger up, and you're pointing at your thighs. Now you're pointing at your belly, and now you're bringing your finger up and you're pointing it at your chest. Now, all this time you are doing what you did with those other people, and you're having the same kind of experience. You're pointing at your chest. You can see your finger pointing at your chest. Now you're bringing it up, and you're pointing it up, up, up. Now at some point you stop seeing what you're pointing it at. Now we know, of course, I know that I'm pointing this at my head because I can see myself in the camera, and I can see that my finger is pointing at my face. But from my experience right now, and from your experience right now, as you are pointing towards yourself, notice that you are no longer pointing at a part of yourself. And notice that from your experience, not from your memory, not from your logic, not from a reflection in a video or in a mirror, what you're pointing at is a space, an open space, and what is in that space. Isn't it true to say that rather than pointing at your own face, from your experience, you're pointing at no face here? And in that no face, in that space, isn't it the case that everything exists? Everything that you perceive is what you're pointing at when you point here at your own no face. That's what Douglas Harding meant when he said no head. Not that he literally had no head, it's just that where he would have perceived his head, it's not a head that he perceives here, it's everything, it's the totality and everything. So that's an experiment, a series of experiments that helps you to understand a little bit about what non-duality is about. And again, it's experiential, don't think too hard about it. Now, let's have a look at some quotes in terms of what wisdom traditions, and I'm quoting here from this very marvellous book, which is called Jesus, Buddha, Krishna and Lao Tzu, The Parallel Sayings by Richard Hooper. And it's a great book, really, really enjoyable. And I'm just going to read you some quotes from different traditions. So from the Sophia of Jesus Christ, so under the Christianity tradition, before that which is became visible, all things existed in him. He holds all things within himself, but nothing holds him. And within Hinduism, Uncle Badger says, a bit like the kind of stuff you see in Gnosticism. Absolutely, yes. The mystical tradition of Christianity, Gnostic traditions of Christianity, very much this kind of oneness with everything. Oneness and understanding that you and God and reality are indivisible and inseparable. So Krishna says, in terms of the Taittiriya Upanishad, before he manifested himself, he existed within himself. Out of himself he manifested all things. He is known as the one who alone exists. Now, of course, lots of materialistic kind of versions of this and traditional versions of this use kind of masculine pronouns, but it doesn't have to be masculine pronouns. It can be anything. So Buddha says under the Lankavatara Sutra, universal mind is like a vast ocean. On its surface, waves disturb its tranquility, but beneath all is serene and unmoved. Having no personality, all things exist in it. But due to the disturbance on its surface, universal mind became an actor playing many parts. Okay, and then the Tao Te Ching, in terms of Taoism, the great Tao pervades all things and causes all things to come into existence. And some more, again from Christianity, this time from the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. All forms, all beings in the universe exist within and in relationship to each other. In the end, all things will return to their essential nature. And then again from the Upanishads, salt exists in water and we can taste each. The one which is without end, consisting only of awareness, comes out of such elements, then disappears within them once again. And then finally from the Tao Te Ching again, how can the Tao be named? It is no thing. It is without cause and without effect. Tao points to itself. No name can define it. So, those are what some of the wisdom traditions say, and I hope you will notice that those wisdom traditions say basically what you just discovered for yourself. So it's not something that is just the province of the Dalai Lama and enlightened beings like Buddha. It's the province of all of us. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of non-duality, and I will share with you some resources that you can use to find out a bit more about this later on. But now I just want to take a sip of nettle infusion. And I want to talk about how tarot can connect us to this non-dual perspective and how can we use it. So the first thing that I would say about tarot and that I noticed about tarot and that the thing that means a lot, the reason that tarot means a lot to me is for me it symbolizes the underlying unity in apparent separation. And it does this in a couple of key ways. So first of all, if you consider the structure of your tarot deck, and this is why any tarot deck can be used for this. So think of your tarot deck. You know that the majors and the pips are there. The majors represent deep spiritual, transcendental themes, sometimes major life themes. And also then you have the pips, which relate to the minor life themes and things that may be important to you but are not necessarily on that big metaphysical scale. And the tarot represents everything in between. So if you look at the interplay between the majors and the pip cards, you can see that almost every human experience is represented within there. And then if you look at the suit structure of the card, in the suits you have got the 4 elements of creation, and you've also got the 4 human faculties: the physical, emotional, mental, and the spiritual stroke social, depending on what you are, how you conceive of the different suits and representations in your tarot deck. And then you've got the courts, which of course represent, or can represent, the full human lifespan, all the way from innocence to experience, from the pages through to the kings, or whichever representation you have in your decks, birth to experience, youth to age, all of that. All of that is enshrined within your deck. So the structure is very much a structure in which there's a multiplicity of parts, all of which point towards the whole. The second thing that I think is really important in the tarot deck is the symbolism of the Fool. Now, the Fool is that fantastic card that is the representation of duality, creation, life, stepping out of non-duality, stepping out of the nothingness. The card is 0, of course, but we know that the Fool isn't nothing. We know that the Fool is something, so it's something and nothing. So the Fool represents that 0 within which all other things exist. And I like to think of the Fool as actually containing all of the other cards. So I sometimes think about the Fool's knapsack as being basically his tarot deck without the Fool there. He's the Fool and he's got a tarot deck with all of the other cards. And he's also the card from which everything else springs. So all the other major arcana come from the Fool, and so do the 4 suits and all the court cards as well. So the Fool contains everything. And there's a wonderful quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, every man is divinity in disguise, a god playing the Fool. So the Fool is a really important card, and sometimes is dismissed as being something just a bit kind of frivolous, but of course it's not that. It's the totality of everything. So what this means for us is that all of the cards link back to all of the other cards, and they go back to an essential unity. And I often like to think of any tarot reading on any subject can lead us back to that unity as an invitation to remember the unity. And in fact, every tarot reading, we can be asking ourselves a question: are we using tarot, or are we using anything that we pursue to perpetuate this perception of separation that we exist within, which can be useful at times but can be very lonely and confounding at times? Or do we use it as a reminder, a pointer back to our essential unity and connectedness with everything? And certainly that's how I like to use it. I find it a great reminder of what it is that joins us together rather than what separates us. So I have 3 decks to share with you, which I think lend themselves really well to different ways of perceiving non-duality. But as I say, any tarot deck does represent non-duality. So the first one is one that I know you're going to be familiar with, or at least many of you will be familiar with, and that is the very wonderful Osho Zen Tarot. How beautiful is this deck? Now, I know that there are some issues with the whole Osho thing, and if you've watched that Netflix documentary Wild Wild West, then you'll understand what I mean. Nonetheless, this is a very deep, beautiful, exciting card, and it represents so many fantastic non-dual aspects, and it's well worth dipping into. So there we have, transformation, the death card. You can just see this wonderful representation of the creation and destruction and recreation of everything. Such lovely images. Then we have, this is the Chariot card, awareness, and the idea that this Buddha nature, Simon mentioned it earlier, we all have a Buddha nature. This Buddha nature is inside of us, even when we are feeling a bit stressed and a bit, what's happening? The Chariot in this deck, no thingness, a reminder that we are no thing but also all things. And maturity, I think this is the Ace of Pentacles. I think this is rainbows in this deck. And I'm seeing, Kelly has said that she's going to have to watch this back. Kelly Bear said, I need to watch this back because my brain is fried. And now everyone thinks that Kelly is leaving, but Kelly's not leaving. I know that you're still here, Kelly. I know that you're still here. I can see you there. So that is the Ace of Rainbows. And we have, now this is an interesting one, Page of Clouds, which is swords in this deck, or clouds in this deck, but represents a Page of Swords. And look, the idea of mind being the thing that can really lead us down some blind alleys and make things difficult. What is it Shakespeare said, there's nothing is a problem but thinking made it so. And here we go, doesn't this just represent the wonderful playfulness and humour that Becca was talking about? So this is the Page of Fire in this deck, and look, this marvellous clown. Now I know that not everyone likes clowns, they can be a bit scary, I get that, but this is actually the clown that is in touch with everything that's going on. Absolutely fantastic. So, my goodness, it's now 4:26, so I think I'm still on track though. I've got my little timings written here, so I know where I'm meant to have been at by the time I finish things. So, I need to finish these 3 decks by 4:30. Am I going to do it? I think I will. I'm slightly concerned now that because this weird long way up thing is happening with the video, I hope it's not going to interfere with my ability to show you my spread. But you know what? We'll just play it by ear. It'll be fine. I'm trusting in the unity of everything. So the next deck that I want to share with you is the Tarot of Transformation. I have to tell you, Tarot of Transformation has got rubbish cardstock, but it is a beautiful deck. And again, represents such wonderful non-dual themes. So the 6 of Discs, the Web of Life. Absolutely lovely. 1 of Cups, so the Ace of Cups in most decks, is this idea of dissolving into oneness. We can dissolve into oneness because we are oneness. The other thing that's slightly annoying about this sideways thing is that when I put my cards up, I'm having to obscure my face, but this is probably more interesting for you than just looking at my face. So this one is Inquiring Mind. So remember the Osho Zen card, which represented for us the idea that the mind can cause us all kinds of difficulties because we get locked into a particular way of thinking. This is actually saying that inquiring mind, self-inquiry, doing the kind of non-dual exercises I mentioned can actually bring you into awareness of this oneness, this unity that you are, this inquiry, and that tarot can help with, can help us tap into non-duality. And we have 10 of Swords, leaving the story. So those of you who know that I follow the teachings of Byron Katie, I've done a series on it, the Awareness Inquiries, and she features in that. She often asks the questions, who would you be without your story? And that's very much what this is saying. Who would you be without this story that you're locked into? And the truth is, you would be connected. So, what we also have here is the Hanged Man, not in control, perfect representation of the Hanged Man. The idea, not only are you not in control, but you are not the doer. You are part of the unity that is doing all of it. So that kind of lets us off the hook to some extent in terms of having to figure everything out all the time. Sometimes it's just about just getting into the flow. Again, here's the Devil, this idea of separation from the source. The idea that real evil is actually, it comes from our belief that we are separate from everything, and then that way we start seeing others as a threat, and we can become violent, or we can fear violence, and it perpetuates this idea that we have something to protect. No self. So 10 of Wands, the idea of no self. And again, going back to the idea of the Fool, that 0, which is also everything. So that is the Marvelous Transformation Tarot. And then finally, in my last minute of this segment, I want to show you a new deck, and this is an independently published deck that I discovered recently. It's been created by a gentleman called Jan Strub, and it is the Advaita Tarot, which is based actually on a combination of exactly what we've been talking about, Advaita Vedanta and Tarot itself. Now, I have only just got this deck and I haven't even had a chance to look at it in a great deal of detail. So I'll just show you some of the cards, and then I'll show you what some of the cards, what it says about some of the cards in the guidebook. So let's start off with the good old Fool, and you'll see there the image. So let me just read to you what Jan says about the Fool. There's some instructions in here about working with the tarot generally, and about what Advaita Vedanta is and what the different things represent. And in terms of the Fool, what he has to say is, this is innocence beginning, jump into the unknown, freedom. Innocence makes it possible to experience freedom without awareness of that freedom. For children, there may be the experience of that which is ultimately experienced in the universe, the last card of the major arcana. That is the Fool's strength. It's a blissful state, but in this image, as you start on the path, there is also a sense of the necessity to continue. Once innocence is lost, there is no choice but to move on, experiencing and learning what it takes to achieve the state of card number 21. So each of these cards has got a little aphorism in it that relates to this perception of unity, and you'll see they each have a keyword. I'll put a link to where you can get this deck down below, and they each have a rather beautiful image on them. It's just interesting to see tarot combined specifically with Advaita and the Advaita tradition. So it's unusual. So 10 of fire, we saw 10 of wands earlier, ecstasy. So I'll come back to you with more information about this deck, and the link will be popped below once I have edited this video properly in terms of all the details. So that is the three different bits and bobs of my my cards. And now what I'd like to do, if we can do this, I'm going to share with you a spread. Now, quite how this is going to work, I don't know. I might even have to hold the phone. Whoops, sorry about that bang. So come with me, my friends, to my little board. I was going to try and hook it onto this, but I don't think it will work. No, I'm going to have to hold it. So I hope you can see this, and I hope this isn't too jerky. So BCC's non-dual wisdom spread. And I know it's kind of in a slightly awkward angle because of this phone being an awkward angle. But it's all right, we can do this. We're going to do this. So now, here we are at the legendary whiteboard. Thank you, Book White. So this is a 5-card spread, and I wanted to show it to you in one go. So let me just pull it out a bit so you can see it. So there's the 5-card spread. And the first card, number 1, is what separates me. The second card is that second one over there in the red. Why must I join? So, you know, we start off separated and then we join. So what separates me? Why must I join? And then in the middle we have my bridging card. And there, I hope you're not getting seasick with my shaky camera work here. And then number 4, we have the Fool's message. So what message does the Fool have for us in this spread? And then finally, the final card is what I call the wisdom reading card. Now, those of you who are familiar with the work of Rachel Pollack will know that the wisdom reading card, or she does wisdom readings where you do a tarot reading, and instead of get the fisherman's friend out, oh dear Kelly, I don't think I can do that on camera. The wisdom reading is about asking big questions about the topic at hand. So not things like, you know, will I meet a tall, dark, handsome stranger, or what's going to happen next week, but big questions like what is the meaning of life? I think one of the things that she did, one of the first ones she did, was something like, what's the tarot reading that God used to create the universe? So what I'm doing here is, my question is, what is the soul? Now this bit is going to be tricky, because what I've done is, I'm going to now get ready, have a look. I'm going down the way. I hope you can see this. There is my little deck of cards. I've shuffled these already. because I can't shuffle such a big deck of cards, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first 5 and use them as my readings. Now, I'm going to try and hold you steady. This is going to be interesting. We're going to be all over the place here. So that's number 2. This is like live action, stop motion, real time, do a reading, and possibly get seasick with it stuff. So let me get them all up. I hope I'm putting them up in the right order. So that would be the Fool's Message. And this is what it's all about, people. This is real life live tarothon, even with squinty cameras that are the wrong way around. Anyway, so there we are. That's my reading. So let's just look at this. If that first one was what separates me, it's the Magician. So what might that mean for me? I would say that that means something like, well, the Magician is all about as above, so below, manipulation, if you like, of energy and matter in order to create things. So to an extent, this is a very positive card, of course, but to an extent, what we could say is that why this separates me is it puts me in the position of being the doer. It puts me in a position of feeling I have to create things, I have to do things, I have to make things happen. And the moment I believe that about myself, I lose touch with the oneness and the flow of things. It's not right or wrong, it's just an observation that the moment you get locked into the idea of you're having to do things, you then become this separated individual. That's not a bad thing, it's just an observation. So number 2, what we've got here is the 7 of Cups. So this question was, why must I join? So in other words, what is it about the 7 of Cups that's telling me I need to join? What's the motivation there? Well, it's cups, which of course means something to do with emotions, or could do. And here we have the person trying to choose from different things. So perhaps what this is saying is, without this sense of separation, without this sense of unity, in a sense of separation, our life is one endless process of choosing between different things and worrying, are we choosing the right thing? Have we done it right? Have we done it wrong? Will we make a mistake? Will we get it? Will we trip up? What happens if we pull out a poison chalice or a good thing? Who knows? So why must we join? Because it gives us this sense that actually we're not separated and we're not going to make the wrong choice. That actually we are in a position where there are lots of things that are going to be equally good if we can perceive them that way. So I'm just kind of extemporizing here, so you can do this with your own card and you can think about what these ones mean for yourself. So bridging card, Page of Swords. Well, just coming to my mind immediately is the idea the page is innocence, it's youth, swords, it's to do with thinking. So for me, that card often represents a beginner's mind. So I think definitely beginner's mind helps us to be connected to things. What's the Fool's Message? Well, we have the 8 now of Swords. So I think the Fool's Message here is the idea that, again, it's this thing of thinking sometimes traps us in a prison of our own making, but we can always step outside of it. The Fool's reminding us not to get too caught up in our thoughts. And then finally, my wisdom question was, what is the soul? So what we've got is the Ace of Cups. Now that's a rather lovely card for that. The wellspring of everything, the connection between heaven and earth, the connection between man and God, the fruitfulness of nature, the peace that comes to us when we're connected, all of that could mean those things. So that's just a very quick canter through a potential spread. Now, all the time I've been doing that, I have been completely unable to keep up with chat, so I've got no idea what's going on. Are you even still with me? Who even knows? I'm still here, I hope you are too. So I hope you've not all got seasick with all that wobbling about, but that would be my reading. So I will put that up somewhere. I'll do a blog post or something and I'll put the reading up so that you can, and I'll link it below so you can find it again. And that's that. So you know what? This is amazing. We're kind of on track. In fact, we're a little bit ahead because I meant to be finished that by 4:45 and it's 4:40. So I I'm going to have a look at some of the questions. Okay, so Lynn is saying not quite clear on what the wisdom card is actually referring to. Good question, Lynn. So I should have said what that relates to. I just want to make sure the microphone isn't obscured. I hope you can hear me. What that relates to is you've done a reading on how you can get connected, how you can move from separation to unity, how you can get in touch with your non-dual nature. The wisdom question, that last card, which I should have said is also can be one card or it can be many. It could be a whole other spread. You could do a whole wisdom spread. The idea behind that is that when we're talking about non-duality and enlightenment, we're talking about big picture stuff. So it's your opportunity to come up with the question, the big meaningful life question that you want to know something about, you want to know more about. So you know, Rachel Pollack, as I say, did one which was what is the spread that God used to create the universe? Now, this is all very theoretical. I don't think she literally means God was sitting there with a tarot deck and used this spread and then created the universe. It's a way of tapping into infinite wisdom. So you decide what's the big wisdom question you would like the answer to, and you ask your tarot deck. And doing it at the end of this spread is just brilliant because you've already looked at what is it that can connect you better with what's going on. So that's the thinking behind that. Now, somewhere in Time Tower is saying, I love those magnetic large cards. Where did you find them? I made them. I'm very proud. What I did was I got the giant Rider-Waite, and what I then did was first of all I coloured, let me just grab one. I coloured the edges of the giant Rider-Waite with pen to represent the elemental attribution, and then I got magnetic strips that are stick-on, and I glued them onto the back, and now I have got a whole deck of Rider-Waite magnetic cards that I can put on my whiteboard, and I used that extensively in my series Tarot to the Nines, which excuse me, maybe I should have another fisherman's friend. Tarot to the Nines, which looked at tarot and numerology and lots of wisdom traditions as well, and how the progressive number through the deck represents the evolution of consciousness. So I'll put a link to that below as well once I finish this live. So it was great fun. I really enjoyed doing it, and it is very handy, but they are a bugger to shuffle. So before I did this live, I shuffled them by basically spreading them all out on the floor and jumbling them up and then pulling them together. So Brian, maybe you need something stronger like a fisherman's doctor or a doctor's friend, or maybe a fisherman's friend and a doctor's friend at the same time. The other good thing about these cards is you can use them to fan yourself when you get too hot, as I was getting in the middle of Becca's chat. If you have not yet watched Becca's chat and you're re-watching this, go back and watch Becca's. Go back and watch all of them so far and watch all the ones that come after, because it has been brilliant so far and I have learned so much. It's been so much fun. Anyway, I mustn't waffle, otherwise I'm going to run out of time. So we're into almost the last 15 minutes. So let me just have a quick look through. Ancient Voices 24-hour BCC 20. I don't think I could last for 24 hours. That would finish me off. And her friend's friend Elle, absolutely, yes. So what I want to do in this last 15 minutes before I hand over to the marvellous Kelly at The Truth in Story is share with you some resources, because non-duality is a big topic and it's quite difficult to, well, as I've said, it's virtually impossible to wrap your head around. You can't really do it. But you can tap into lots of great resources that are out there, lots of reading. So here are some of my very favourites. This one is a book called The Book of One, and it's written by Dennis Waite, and in this he basically outlines a whole host of different non-dual traditions and spiritual traditions. So he goes into the history of Advaita Vedanta. He talks about the nature of man. He talks about different traditions. He looks at psychology, all kinds of different stuff. There's lots of really interesting things. The limits of knowledge, the creation and time, consciousness, the nature of the self, enlightenment, direct path teachings and inquiry, questions like who am I, how you meditate on these big questions, all kinds of really useful information. Quite heavy going at times, but a good introduction. If you want to know a bit more about the Advaita Vedanta question itself, then this is a great book, Introduction to Vedanta, by Swami Dayananda, Understanding the Fundamental Problem. Quite a short book, but it goes into a lot of detail about the history of Advaita Vedanta and how self-judgment keeps us separate and how we can get past that and into a better perception of reality. One of my favourite non-dual texts is the Tao Te Ching. I quoted from that earlier. This is the Stephen Mitchell translation. Stephen Mitchell is actually Byron Katie's husband. In fact, one of the great experiences you can have, I think, if you are interested in non-duality, is to get this copy of the Tao Te Ching and get Byron Katie's book, 1,000 Names for Joy, because what she does is she takes each one of the texts in the Tao Te Ching and then writes an essay from her experience as an awakened being. She doesn't describe herself as an awakened being, but she is an awakened being. And she basically talks about, so she might take, for example, here's text 40, I'm just reading this randomly. Return is the movement of the Tao. Yielding is the way of the Tao. All things are born of being. Being is born of non-being. That's that fool coming out again. So she would take that text and then write an essay about how she experiences that in her real life, and it's absolutely fascinating. If you were to read this and Byron Katie's book together, you would have an amazing mind-opening experience, so I highly recommend that as well. Then we have some modern teachers, or more modern teachers. Hi Erica, Erica's in the room. There's so many people here, I can't say hello to you all, but I love that you're here. It's been absolutely fantastic, thank you very much. So this is Douglas Harding's book on having no head, lots of experiments in here, lots of different ways of understanding what I was describing earlier, that pointing experiment and others, they're in there. Well worth a read. All of his books are worth a read. He's written many of them. He's dead now, but many of his books are still available. One of my very favourite current non-dual teachers is Rupert Spira. Elle said, must have been a challenge to write with no head. I think it probably was. I don't know how we do it. I don't know how I do it. I've got no head and I don't know how I do it. So this is the unity of consciousness, or the nature of consciousness, essays on the unity of mind and matter. Rupert Spira has an excellent YouTube channel. It's absolutely brilliant if you want to tap into it and find out a bit more. He does Q&As as well. Well worth a look if you are interested. Another good modern teacher is Gregg Goode. He's written a couple of books. One of them is called The Direct Path, which has got other experiments in it. And this is about how one can get in touch with the fact that really, ultimately, what we are is awareness. And how can we maintain that awareness that we are awareness. Not a very long book, so it's very readable, very easy to get through. I can highly recommend that. If you're interested in the more kind of scientific aspect of all of this, and you might want to look at how different scientific traditions relate to non-duality, then this guy, Bernardo Kastrup, is well worth having a look at. And this book, Why Materialism is Baloney, is a really good one. How true skeptics know there is no death and fathom answers to life, the universe, and everything. And he looks at all kinds of things like the way that the brain and the mind relate. Looks at the mind, tackling the mind-body problem. Are you a mind? Are you a body? Are you both? Are you neither? And he talks about a number of scientific experiments that help point us in the non-dual direction. So that is worth having a look at. A fairly modern teacher, not with us any longer, but from the late part of the last century, is Ramana Maharshi, who is an awakened, or was an awakened being, who woke up to the nature of his reality. And this book pulls together a number of his teachings, edited by Arthur Osborne, and all kinds of interesting stuff in there, including the importance of self-inquiry and how it is that you can inquire into your true self. One of his disciples is Robert Adams, also no longer with us, but well worth having a look at some of his writing. This book, Silence of the Heart, is his masterwork, really, and it's the one that is well worth looking at if you would like to know more about how he relates to non-duality. I mentioned Byron Katie, and this is her textbook on how to do her process called The Work, which is about how to inquire into your stressful thoughts and see what lies behind those stressful thoughts. I've described how to do her process in previous videos, so I won't go through that now, but if you read some of her dialogues with people where they're doing the inquiry with her, you will again get this sense of connectedness. That this is the kind of book that when I read it, it just completely, talk about having no head, it blasted open my head. And I found it really fascinating and well worth a look. And again, she's got a YouTube channel, lots of videos of her doing the work with people. And again, I think that's the best experience you can have. I had the privilege of training with her. I went to her school for the work. She does a nine-day school for the work. And in 2007, gosh, 12 years ago, I went and studied with her. And you know, she was just brilliant. And I'm not really one for gurus in the sense that I tend not to follow gurus. And I wouldn't say that she's my guru, but when I met her, I had kind of wondered, you know, is she really as enlightened as she appears in her writings and on her channel and so on? And of course, you can't tell by just talking to somebody. But what I would say is when I met Byron Katie, when you interact with her, it's very clear that when she's looking at you and interacting with you, you are everything in her perception. And then when she moves on from looking at you and is looking at somebody else, they are everything. So it's equal opportunity. It's not that you're some special thing. It's just that, you know, she's not someone who looks at you with any sense of distraction. And I think most of us know that even when we are talking to people we really like, we're somehow a bit distracted, and people talking to us are probably thinking about other things. That's not what appeared with her. And how can I know? I don't know what's in her mind. All I can tell you is my experience. It was a very profound, deep experience, and very special one. And then finally, a resource. This isn't actually written by this chap. It's written about him. But Nisargadatta Maharaj, a bit similar to Ramana Maharshi, had an awakening experience and got in touch with who he really was, beyond this idea of a separate self. And his famous book is called I Am That, and that's well worth looking at. He was quite an irascible, some might even say grumpy gentleman, and yet he spoke about really deep, wonderful connectivity, and it's worth checking out his book as well. In fact, there's a quote from him at the beginning of the Advaita Tarot book that I shared earlier, and it's a lovely quote. It's wisdom tells me I am nothing. Love tells me I am everything. Between those two, my life flows. So, yes, now let's have a look at some of the questions in the chat, because just a reminder that Kelly Fitzgerald is next. Kelly Bayer has put the link in the chat for Kelly if you are intending to head over there and see her. And I've also put the link in my description at the end of this video, at the bottom of this video, and also a link to my blog where you can link to all of the participating channels. So now, I saw a comment about, yes, Joey Jojo said, cranky gurus are good as long as they aren't so cranky as to be abusive. Absolutely. That's one of the things about gurus. You've got to be careful. You shouldn't leave your common sense at the door when you are connecting with people who are allegedly enlightened. I can't give you tips and tricks about who the best guru to follow is. I wouldn't dare to do that. But what I would say to you is, whomever you're following, make sure that you feel that they are supportive and they have integrity, and you know, that they are as egoless as they can be. Jennifer's asked, what do you think of Russell Brand? I guess I kind of have mixed feelings about Russell Brand. I used to think he was a bit irritating, I must confess. Recently, I actually think that he has become really thoughtful person and thoughtful interviewer. And actually, he did an interview recently with Byron Katie on his podcast, and it was a very deep, very perceptive interview, and one that I think is well worth checking out. So I think, you know, he's a good example of somebody who actually is, you know, well worth checking out and catching up with, because he has got a lot to say about non-duality and various other things. Now, I see that Kelly's going to be on in 5 minutes, so in those 5 minutes I'm just going to have a quick look to see if there's any questions that I can pick up that we missed during this. So lots of you are saying you enjoy this. Thank you so much. I'm glad you did, and I hope it wasn't too. I hope the camera glitch at the beginning hasn't made it too difficult for you to follow. I don't think it has. You seem to have been following along absolutely marvelously. Yeah, let me just have a look. Yeah, Stephen's saying now I have so much homework to do. Yeah, I absolutely would say there's a lot of material out there, and one of the things about non-duality is it's very easy to get kind of sucked into really heady thinking about it. So just take it gently, take it easy, and later on in this session, in this Tarot-thon, my friend Jeff, who's in the room, or was in the room I think, is going to be covering how tarot reflects A Course in Miracles. Now, of course, A Course in Miracles is actually one of the more modern non-dual teachings. And the interesting thing about that is if you're somebody who is either Christian, or if you have been part of the Christian religion and found it difficult, and you want something that has got Christian language and overtones, but actually is a bit more like some of the Eastern traditions that I mentioned, like the Tao Te Ching and so on, then A Course in Miracles is really well worth checking out, because what it does is it actually takes that kind of language, but comes and describes reality from a non-dual perspective. And the interesting thing, of course, about A Course in Miracles is it's written in the voice of Jesus. And it was channeled through somebody. Now, Jeff, I'm sure, will tell you all lots of information about that in his chat. So I won't say too much more about that. But definitely worth looking into the Tao Te Ching and others. For me, probably the best thing you can do is develop a kind of self-inquiry process. So if you can find a way of tapping into your own awareness, and some of the exercises I shared with you can help do that. Byron Katie's work, you know, I'll link the video to my video series of her below. And just so you all know, I have just seen Maya streaking across the neighbour's garden. Not streaking as in naked, she's fully furred. But she's streaking across the neighbour's garden, which means that she is putting in a little bit of an appearance, even though she's not on camera. But I knew that she wouldn't want to. No show without punch. I knew she wouldn't want to miss out. So we're now down to the last couple of minutes. So let me just have another look in the chat. Kelly's saying her brain's melting, but super interesting. Well, I hope it is, and I hope you enjoyed that. And thank you all very much for being here. And yes, I don't want to close too quickly, because I don't want Kelly to be bounced into suddenly starting. But she's got a minute and 45 seconds to go, and she's next. Kelly Bear has put the link into the next. Into her chat, which is next. So I hope you'll enjoy her. She is doing tarot, that is the question, and I think that's going to be about the cards as questions, which is absolutely fantastic, very interesting. Hasn't this been interesting so far? Hasn't this been an absolutely brilliant tarot-thon? It's my first one, although I watched last year's, but it's my first one participating, and everyone has just done such a great job. So much work's gone into it. Simon has put so much work into it, and I know that he's going to be with us for the whole thing. He'll be exhausted by the end, but it's great seeing him popping up in everyone's chat. And I know that a number of you have stayed in everyone so far, and I hope that you have enjoyed it and will continue to enjoy it. There are so many great things still to come. We're not even halfway through yet, and I'm meant to be going out later, but I'm trying to think of excuses to not go out so I can hang around and watch the rest of the chats, because they're all just absolutely fantastic. And you're just absolutely fantastic for being here and for your fantastic questions. As I say, what I'll do is I'll go back through what I've got, and I'll try and pick up any questions that I may have missed. And then what I'll do is I'll do a follow-on video picking up those questions, and I'll do a blog post where I can link some of the resources that you can connect with. So so that's that, I think. And I think Kelly is probably going to launch any time now. I hope that we are all feeling well, and the time is just flying past. Cottage Witch is in the room, just said the time is flying past, and it absolutely is flying past. What I'm going to do is be thinking about some of my next videos and some of the things that I'll be trying to share with you. I even have got some decks set aside. I thought, well, just in case anything goes wrong and I have to stay on for longer, or just somebody drops out at the last minute, I've got a couple of other decks that I can share. So what I'll probably do is make a video of those before too long. Jamie is saying it's 7 hours already. I cannot believe it's 7 hours. 1 hour of talking has just about done my voice in. So 7 hours of talking. Thank goodness we're only doing an hour each. So that was us. And not seeing Kelly yet, so I'm going to just hang on until Kelly's on. I don't want to leave you in the lurch. Let me just see. Oh, apparently we've had a troll or two. I didn't see any trolls, but that's fine. We eat trolls for breakfast and pick our teeth with